Hello everyone, I'm Katra. I started playing Trails with SkyFC back in October 2024. I finished playing Daybreak 2 back in June 2025, and since then I've been patiently waiting to play Trails Beyond the Horizon. Trails might be my favorite series of all time now, or at the very least in my top 3. I've loved every single one of these games, and I was extremely excited to finally play Horizon. Now that I've finally beaten the game, and after being stunlocked for 2 days because of that ending, I've decided to compile my thoughts and write a review of the game. Before I start, I want to give a bit more context. First off, a warning. There's going to be massive spoilers across the entire video. A better YouTuber would have a spoiler-free section, but there's so much to talk about here when it comes to the story, I'd rather not do that. Secondly, I'm going to leave the story for last since it's the biggest section. You can skip directly there if you only care about that, but I have some things to say about the gameplay as well. Third, this review is going to be sometimes based on subjective thoughts and vibes. If I say, for example, that something is filler, I'm talking about how it felt to me. Don't take anything I say as an objective truth unless I explicitly say so. Finally, I was spoiled on 3 things before playing the game. Maybe even more, but the 3 that I can remember being spoiled on are: I knew that a reset would happen at the end, I saw the final frame of the game with Agnes transformed, and I saw the frame of Agnes confessing to Van. Obviously, I would have loved to play the game spoiler-free, but in this day and age, that seems impossible. Either way, I don't think those 3 spoilers affected my enjoyment of the game too much. That's all I had to say here. So anyway, here's my full review of The Legend of Heroes: Trails Beyond the Horizon. The gameplay of Horizon is pretty much the same as Daybreak 2, but with a couple of additions that in my opinion make it better. There's now more quartz, more crafts, the COC system, Awakening, SCLM charge, shard commands, and blitz. Let's go through them in order. When it comes to new quartz, there's a big asterisk here. I actually thought it had a lot of new quartz, but it turns out there's only one actually new one, the fire quartz that gives you 1 extra boost gauge when entering combat. Which, to be fair, is an amazing skill, and it makes combat a lot better when keeping it, especially on characters that can regenerate boost gauge with their crafts. The other quartz that I thought were actually new actually existed on Daybreak 2, but you could only get them in the post-game. Here, they're available much earlier, and they are all great because they have actual effects instead of just being stat sticks. I wish that it would have added more actual new quartz, but for me this wasn't an issue because I didn't delve too deep into Daybreak 2's post-game, but for someone who did, they probably would be disappointed about the lack of new quartz in Horizon. There's more crafts in this game because obviously there's new characters, but even old characters got new crafts. I think that the 2 main design choices here were to give more support crafts to characters, even to ones that are focused on DPS, and to give more unique crafts in general. You have the ones that recover boost from Elaine, Grow, and Rufus, the unique ones like Reset's Clone and the Stigmas, and a few support crafts like Aaron's Scarlet Dance. I think these are all fantastic additions, especially the boost recovery ones, like I mentioned in the previous section, because when combined with the quartz that increases the boost gauge, it makes combat so much faster. You can start a fight with Elaine, pop ZOC into a couple of boost recoveries and a shard command, and finish with an S-craft to start with 6 maximum boost gauge and plenty of buffs for the team. Speaking of ZOC, that's another new addition to combat, both in field and command battles. In field battles, it just turns off slow motion and makes you deal more damage. The only reason why you would use this is to fight bombs, pretty much. In command battles, however, this is a much better mechanic. It is part of a rework to boosting, where you now only need to boost once to get the full effect and be able to S-craft. And if you boost twice, you enter ZOC, which gives you an extra turn. This is such a nicer system, and it enables so many combos. For one, the fact that you don't need to burst to S-craft is much better, and I don't think it makes S-crafts too broken. Second, ZOC enables you to instant cast any art as long as you spend 2 boost gauges. This is such a nice buff to magic users and to survivability in general. Being able to quickly cast a healing art or a cleanse, especially with how many enemies apply debuffs, is awesome. Third, these changes make clearing out normal enemy fights so much faster. By late game you can spam S-crafts if you have CP regeneration, but before then you can clear this much faster than you used to with these extra turns. Overall, this is easily the best iteration of the boost system. There's not really much to say about Awakening. It's a mechanic in field battles exclusive to some characters that allows them to transform. While transformed, you gradually lose boost gauge, but you do more damage, and if you enter a command battle, the character will already be in that special form. I think I've used this mechanic probably less than 20 times across my entire playthrough, simply because I don't really care for field battles. I just go in, fill the break bar, and then enter turn-based combat with an advantage. That is not to say that the action combat is bad. In fact, I much prefer it over how the previous games worked. It's simple, but it works. You just dodge, attack until a break, and then open the shard. And I don't think it needed more additions. It's clear that the developers don't want you to just use action combat. The fact that enemies take so much longer to kill in field battles while giving less XP proves that. They probably just added these field battle mechanics because they're cool and for the final boss. But they don't incentivize me to play action combat more because the break bar is there. Once it is filled, there's no reason for me to not enter turn-based mode. I think that if they want to make the action combat even more prevalent, they're going to have to rethink the entire gameplay. But I don't think they should. Personally, I much prefer action combat to turn-based, so if Horizon 2 had the gameplay of an East game, I would go crazy. But the fact is that a lot of people play Trails precisely because it's turn-based, and going even more action than this might drive them all away. So I say just keep the action combat like this. It's totally fine right now. I mean, the other alternative would be having 2 entirely different combat styles and letting people choose, but that's not realistic at all, and I don't want to imagine how that would work. The next new mechanic is the last field battle exclusive, SCLM charge. This is just like the cross charge in Daybreak 2, except 1,000 times better. Instead of forcing you to swap and stopping your actions, the ally character does a big attack without swapping, and you can continue your own attacks as well. It helps a lot with breaking faster, and it feels really nice to pull off multiple times in a row. Not much more to say about it, it's a nice addition to the game. Shared commands are just pre-borders that spend boost gauge instead of having a dedicated resource. It does feel worse at first, but overall it's better because now you actually have to use your brain a bit instead of just spamming this. Not only because boost is a more important resource, but also because now there's a lot more enemies that can use anti-orders. Oh, and now you can override them. I can't believe that wasn't a thing already. I do think on this, balance could have been a tiny bit better because some feel quite strong, especially Altera's order. I also would have made them maybe last a bit longer. All of the ones I used were either 4 or 6 turns, and when using COC, those can go by pretty fast. But this is just me nitpicking. Overall, Brave Orders have always been great, and they still are. The final new mechanic added is Blitz. This is just a turn bonus, and when you get it, it boosts the power of pretty much anything you use, whether it's an attack or a recovery move. When using basic attacks, in particular, it works like an SCLM. The Blitz character shows up to do an extra hit. I believe this mechanic was just introduced so they could avoid designing a couple of characters, but still have them do things in combat. Toa and Lapis are the two main ones here. They're not playable characters, but they can appear with shared commands and blitzes. I mean, I'd much prefer if they were playable, of course, but this isn't too bad. The one bad thing about blitzes is that I think they maybe should have been a different mechanic instead of a turn bonus. It feels like because they didn't want the fans of these characters to be mad, they made the blitz bonus appear a lot, so they could be useful in combat. And when I say a lot, I mean it. It's like half of the turn bonuses now are blitzes. It's not a huge issue, but it does reduce the variety a bit. Still, I think Blitz is a cool mechanic, and I wouldn't be opposed to keeping it for Horizon 2. Anyway, that's all the new additions. But I wanna talk about the rest of the gameplay in general too, even if a lot of the things I'm going to mention next also apply to Daybreak 1 and 2. Starting with the Quartz system, which even though I think is better than the Cold Steel version, I still prefer the Sky version overall. The Quartz system in the Sky games had a lot more nuance to it, with being able to choose what arts you wanted depending on the service values. The new skills are sort of similar, but there's way less choices, at least when it comes to good ones. For arts, you want to restore EP and the one that deals a bunch of hits, and for attacks, you want burst gain and the one that deals damage to stunned enemies. That's about it. Plus, you only really care about the attack line for physical characters and the art line for magic characters. Yes, the extra line exists, but it doesn't really do all that much. And the new ornament lines are either 3 slots or 4 slots, compared to back in Sky when a character could have between 1 and 4 lines. Maybe even more, I don't remember. Hi, it's me, Katra from the future. A better YouTuber would have replaced a bunch of lies I just said, but I hate having to throw away things I've already recorded. And to be fair, I prefer leaving them in. These mistakes show that I'm not perfect, and also prove a few of my points down the line. But anyway, here's a few corrections. First, the defense and extra lines do actually matter, especially the defense line. Turns out that now, there's 4 defense skills that trigger when attacking, and they're stupidly overpowered too. The craziest one is AE Impassion Guard, which gives you a whopping 30 CP when attacking. The funny part is that by checking random quartz in the defense lines of my 2 main physical attackers, they both ended up with that skill. No wonder Elaine and Aaron felt pretty strong to me. Now I know why. In my defense, I will say that these are named poorly. When I first checked the skills to see if there were any new ones, when looking at the shield page, I just saw that all of them had guard on the name, and immediately assumed that they would only activate when defending, like they had been for 2 games already. No, putting an A in front of the skill's name doesn't help me in the slightest. They should have just named it Impassion Attack, and then I would have realized that they were new. The extra line was just me being dumb. Yes, the skills there aren't as important, but that doesn't mean they don't really do that much. Here, I'll show you images of the skill lists and mark the skills that I think are actually useful while I keep talking. Anyway, my second mistake was about the weapon skills. Turns out, you don't want any of the skills I mentioned. Bosses are hard to stun, and you don't need burst gain when Impassion Guard just gives you infinite CP. The skills that you want are Sword and Shield Buster. Shield Buster speaks for itself, but why Sword Buster? Well, as it turns out, the 10% damage these skills give is multiplicative. It stacks, and it appears to be added at the end of the damage formula. At least that's what it looked like from what I've seen. Granted, I've only done one test, because it's already taking long enough to make this video. But if what I said is true, and it seems like it is, then these skills are way stronger than I initially thought, and you should use them on physical attackers, absolutely. There's 3 more skills where it is 10% increased. 2 are in the drive line, and 1 is in the extra line. This is also why I underestimated the extra line. I did not think that Legbuster was that useful, but I don't believe my opinion about the drive line changes at all. Judgment Feather and Absorbing Arts just seem way too strong. Anyway, that should be everything I had to correct. So now, back to the main timeline. The other thing that differentiates a character's ornaments are the single element slots, which here are honestly more of a detriment than anything. In Sky, this just meant this character wants to use arts from this element. Here, it means, oh, you want to get burst gain? Well, too bad. One of your slots is locked into an element that's not fire or water, and there's nothing you can do about it. A character being forced into certain arts wasn't as big of an issue because another character could compensate. But here, like I said, most characters want to use the same skills. For Horizon 2, changing the whole system would obviously be too much, but I hope they at least change up a lot of the skills. Give every element one useful skill, and make the defense and extra bars way more useful. That would go a long way towards improving the quartz system. But for the next arc, yeah, I think a full revamp is in order, starting from scratch. Some people say that the sky system was perfect and want it back, and though I agree that it's the best, it's far from perfect. There's one key thing that's missing from every single quartz system in the series, the sense of progression. It's one of my favorite things in gaming, and one that's notably missing from the Trails games. Here's one comparison, so you can understand what I mean. When you start Kingdom Hearts 2, you have a 3-hit combo and 1 magic spell. By the end, you can change the number of hits in your combo. You have 6 magic spells, 5 different transformations, 4 summons, multiple finishers, etc. You feel like your character gets stronger over the course of the game, and not just in terms of numbers. In Trails, while there is a bit of that sense of progression by getting new crafts and arts and unlocking slots, that's about it. You can perform every single mechanic in the game from the very start or close to it. The progression here is mostly just bigger numbers. You were using an attack 2 quartz, and now you can equip an attack 3 quartz. You opened up a new slot, and equip an action 3 to gain speed. How exciting. Yes, I know the craft upgrade system exists, but again, that just results in bigger numbers too. There's really not that big of a difference between a combat in the first hour of the game and a combat 100 hours into the game. This is the main thing that I hope gets looked at once Falcom starts working on the game after Horizon 2. Make an orphan system that's easy to use, that allows for creative builds and variety, and that makes the player feel stronger and stronger the more they play and upgrade it. Speaking about the quartz system, one thing that really bothered me was having to keep so many characters built. With 3 routes, that's at least 12 characters that you need to keep up to date. Equipment is totally fine, but the ornaments are another problem. Sepith is not exactly abundant, mainly because they decided to have the poems on the garden give not that much of it and only of a specific type. Which means that usually what you want to do is go on a character, see what values it needs to get a skill, and then buy the corresponding quartz, then repeat for another character. Doing it this way instead of just buying whatever quartz you think you'll need ensures that no Sepith is wasted, but it makes you spend a lot more time. By late game, it would take me a solid 30 minutes or more to build up my team's ornaments when I started a new route. Why would I need to do that every time? Well, apart from the obvious fact that when you start a new route there's a big level jump and the game expects you to be properly equipped, there's another problem. Remember those new quartz that I mentioned way back? Well, they cannot be crafted, which means that you probably don't have enough for all 12 characters, so you'll need to share them, therefore forcing you to remake your team's ornaments every time you start a route. And yes, I know there's an auto-equip button, but let's be honest, it sucks. This whole issue wouldn't bother me as much if there was actual build variety, but like I said before, you pretty much want the same 2 skills on every character. I honestly don't know how you can fix this entirely. Letting me buy quartz directly from the ornament menu if I'm in a shop would help a bit, but it doesn't really solve the problem. Having characters from different routes share ornaments would fix this, but it sounds kinda crazy and it would reduce build variety even more. And a loadout system is out of the question, since every character has a different set of slots. I'm not seeing a perfect solution here. By the way, while you may think that this was also an issue in Reverie, it really wasn't. Yes, there were a lot more characters, but like I said, you really only had to build 4 on every route. And the Gold Seal Quartz system was much simpler. So yeah, if they're going for multiple routes again in Horizon 2, this is something that Falcom will need to look at. That's a lot of negativity in a row, so let's look at a positive thing now. In any RPG, the best bosses are always the humanoid bosses. It doesn't matter how the game plays. Bonus points if they can use the same mechanics that the player can. Well, here in Trails Beyond the Horizon, there's plenty of these fights, and all of them are amazing. You don't know what the word fear means until you see Shizuna hit ZOC and pop Spirit Unification, or when you see Grendel Shaddai hit 2 ice breaks in a row because you got too greedy with dealing damage. This game easily has the best boss fights in the whole series, and it's not even remotely close. Now, I won't deny that maybe they went a bit overboard with the difficulty on some of these. For the fight against Shizuna and Kincaid and the final boss, you pretty much had to have a defensive order up at all times or you risked dying, and I played in normal mode. I don't want to imagine how these fights are on Nightmare, but honestly, I kinda like it. These are fights against insanely strong characters. I'd much rather have them be really hard than really easy. The one tiny complaint I have is that sometimes you could get totally screwed if the turns lined up in a way where an enemy used an order and then another enemy got a turn after, because the brave orders that these bosses use are no joke. Some make your entire party take 50% extra damage. But other than that, yeah, I'd say the bosses in this game were a real highlight and extremely fun. Speaking about balance, well, I can't really say too much about the balance. The game has a lot of characters and I've barely played half of them, so I can't really say if there's ones that are much stronger or weaker than others. From the ones I've played, I'll say that Aaron felt really strong. Probably the strongest physical character, and in my opinion by quite a large margin. That might just be because I had him better built than the others, but being pretty much immune to physical attacks with evasion and reaching high crit stats with his green slots seems really good. Not to mention, his crafts are quite strong too. When it comes to skills, that's where I think there's a clear lack of balance. A lot of the skills aren't really useful. I don't see why I would ever want my attacks to inflict strength down, or ATS down, specifically on shard strikes. Holocore's also didn't feel too balanced. I mean, Bergard's core is just strictly worse than Elaine's, for example. And Altera's is really broken with that very order. There's a lot of crafts in the game, and there's no way I'm talking about all of them, but Catra's shield did feel pretty busted. A huge shield and all stat subs is really strong. But anyway, I don't want to complain about balance too much. For a single player game, as long as there isn't anything that completely breaks the game, I don't really care if it's not the most balanced thing in the world. This was the case on Cold Steel 1 and 2 with the delay builds, which completely trivialize pretty much every single fight in the game. I don't think there's anything like that in Horizon, or if there is, I sure haven't found it. So, at the risk of getting 50 comments saying that X thing is broken and that I suck at the game, there's no issues here as far as I know. Well, I ended up mentioning pretty much every aspect of combat, so I might as well finish the job and talk about the CLM, since I've seen a couple of people on social media criticizing the mechanic. I think it's fine, I don't hate it. It made total sense to add this back in Daybreak 1 when they changed movement to not be an action anymore. If you can just move around every time you get a turn, you need to be given reasons to move around. SCLM is one of the reasons, alongside the new positional crafts. I prefer this to the previous system, 1 because having to spend a turn only on moving felt really bad, and 2 because positioning didn't really feel too important in the previous games. Most of the time, you only thought about it if an enemy was doing a line attack or a small AoE, and even then, you would usually just impede it instead of dodging it. The one complaint I have here is that by endgame, positioning and movement becomes pretty much irrelevant. You can just equip one character with SCLM boost, and the radius becomes so big it's hard to miss it even if you're going for positionals. But more importantly, I feel like the game gives you way too much movement. At the start of the game, you barely have any. The range is way tinier than the size of the field, and positioning requires a lot more thought. But by the final act, just by keeping your boots upgraded, your characters can now move across the entire field. With Grendel's multiple actions, you can literally walk closer to your allies who are on the other side of the arena to get the CLM on the first 3 actions, then walk back for the last one to keep the boss away from them. For Horizon 2, I hope they severely reduce the amount of movement that boots give, and maybe add back in a movement burst to compensate. If you want freedom of movement, you should do to work for it, but right now everyone gets it for free. I guess there's actually one more thing that we can talk about when it comes to the combat, and that's the difficulty. I already mentioned before that a few bosses were a tiny bit overtuned and that I actually prefer that. In general, I'd say the difficulty of the game was on the easier side, apart from those couple of bosses. Now, it is true that I did play the game in normal mode. Yes, I could crank up the difficulty to hard or even nightmare, but here's my complaint. I don't like the way difficulties are designed here. If you don't know, the only thing that nightmare changes is numbers. Enemies deal more damage, they have more health, they stun you more, and they are faster. I haven't played a Trails game on Nightmare mode before, but the idea of it sure doesn't seem like fun to me. To be fair, a lot of games take the same approach, so it's not like this is a Falcom exclusive thing here. But just because many others do it doesn't mean it's right. I much prefer when the higher difficulties have a little more thought put into them, and reward players for being good at the game. Something like Kingdom Hearts 2's critical mode. Yes, enemies deal more damage, but you also deal more damage, and you begin the game with an extra set of skills. It makes the game harder, which is obviously the main function of a difficulty mode should accomplish, but it also changes the experience, and it doesn't make it any less fun. If anything, I'd say the game is at its most fun when playing in critical mode. I think I would be fine playing on Nightmare mode after having played through 13 games in the series, but right now, there's just no reason for me to do so. It doesn't seem like it will make my experience better in any way. I don't expect them to look at this issue for Horizon 2, but I think that for the next arc, they should definitely think about how they can improve the difficulty modes. Anyway, that's it about the combat. There's other gameplay aspects that I could talk about, I guess, like the hacking minigames or the stealth sections, but I don't think it's worth it. My conclusion about the combat is that it's fantastic. I've never preferred turn-based combat to ATB or action combat, but there's no denying that what they've designed here is amazing. Easily the best system in the whole series, and incredibly fun to play. Yes, it does have some things that can be improved, like I mentioned before, but most of those were things outside of battles. Everything between the moment you enter a command battle and the moment you finish it can't really be improved much more in my opinion. It is so good that it's actually becoming an issue. Not for this game, but for Horizon 2 specifically. For the next saga, I'm pretty sure they'll revamp everything again, as they tend to do. But Horizon 2 is still a part of the Calvard arc, which means they're not going to go for any big changes. But you can't just keep combat the same. It has been improving with every game since Daybreak 1. So what can they do? They will likely add new mechanics, and that may become a problem. See, this game is really close to the critical mass of things you can do inside a combat. I didn't know this was a thing until I played Atelier Ryza 3. It is a refined version of Ryza 2's combat system, but they also added new mechanics as you tend to do on sequels. Thing is, they didn't remove a single one of the old mechanics. The combat wasn't bad, but it had so many things that you could do, it felt overwhelming. You had skills, items, fatal drives, modes, parries, breaks, orders, you had to time your attacks, you could swap characters, and now on top of all that, you had the new key system. If you ask me, I still prefer the simplicity of Ryza 2's combat. So how many mechanics do we have now in Horizon? We have basic attacks, crafts, arts, defend, items, S-breaks, boosts, shard commands, COCs, SCLM, stun, EX chain, you can swap characters. To me, Horizon still doesn't feel too bloated, but it's really close. I don't want to finish the section on a negative note. Like I said, I think the combat is incredible and I love it, but looking towards the future, I hope they have this in mind when designing Horizon 2's combat. This section is about how the game looks, feels, sounds, etc. Let's start with one of the most important aspects of any JRPG, The soundtrack might be the hardest part of a video game to be objective about, so again, don't take what I'm about to say as an objective truth. While I wouldn't say that the soundtrack is bad, far from it in fact, it also doesn't reach the same peaks that previous OSTs reached. Now, this might be nostalgia speaking, but when comparing the best songs in this OST to the best songs from the older games, I find that they just don't have that same iconic feel to them. I'd say my favorite songs in here are Battle Junction 1209, Farewell My Dear, What I Want to Tell You, Accumulated Thoughts, Seeking a Distant Dawn, Autumn Knows piano version, Pain of Memories, The Fortress of Destiny, To Confirm My Existence, Under Into Space, Dies Irae, The Cradle by Starlight, and Megami no Uta. Now, you may be saying, dude, you just said that the soundtrack isn't that good, but you listed like 15 tracks you enjoyed. Well, yes, but first off, the OST is over 100 songs, and the lows here are much lower than in any other Trails game. And though I do love these songs I've mentioned, and overall I would say the soundtrack is great, none of these tracks move me like the songs from the previous games did. When I heard the Decisive Collision for the first time, I stood up. When I first encountered To the Future, I teared up. When I was defending the ABC and Inevitable's Trouble started playing, I screamed. These are iconic songs, and again, this might be the nostalgia speaking for me, but I just don't think the best tracks in Horizon are at the same level. But to be fair, I don't think that level has been reached since Reverie. Anyway, don't take this as me complaining, I'm more so just letting you know that I miss the older OSTs. I wish other JRPGs had a soundtrack as good as Horizon's. But yeah, once you've reached the stars, landing on a cloud doesn't seem so impressive. A sentiment that gives this video its title, and one that defines the game pretty accurately. I hope you'll understand it a bit more by the end of the video, but I've still got a bit more I want to say here. The first time I opened up Daybreak 1 and checked how much resources it was consuming, my jaw dropped to the floor. And I'm glad to report Horizon is the same in that regard. I still cannot believe how little resources this game uses up considering how good the game looks. Not to mention, it runs perfectly. I can't speak for everyone, especially because I've heard some people had some crashes. But in my experience playing the PC version, I only had one issue when playing the game. No crashes, no technical or performance issues, no glitches. The only bug I found was that the shader for water reflections acted kinda strangely, and it gave characters a weird afterimage effect. That's the only issue I found, and even that one wasn't too much of a problem because disabling reflections fixed the issue. Just an incredible experience from start to finish. And by the way, you have to consider that I started playing right when the game came out, so it's not like this is the game after countless patches. I think they've only released 2 minor ones since release as of writing the script. Actually insane in this day and age to see a game this polished right from the start. Huge props to the team at PH3 Games for always delivering with the PC versions of Falcon games. The only thing left to talk about here is how the game looks. Surprisingly, it looks quite a bit better than Daybreak 2. I did not expect a graphical improvement considering it's the same engine and how short the development time of these games are, but a lot of textures and models look a lot nicer. But the biggest visual improvement here comes in the form of animations and VFX. The moment you use Rin's S-Craft in the prologue, you can clearly see that there's been a massive upgrade here. There's so much more movement and visual effects. Another aspect that was improved was the camera work. In fact, Rin's S-Craft is also a great example of it. The way the camera moves away from him and spins around is crazy and makes an otherwise great attack so much better. But the upgrades don't just apply to combat. Regular cutscenes have also seen huge improvements. In these, the main thing I want to highlight is facial expressions. There's so much more emotion now behind them, and it's really hard to get this right in games with an anime style. But here, I'd say they look perfect. It can be sometimes hard to notice them because not every character is super expressive, but take a good look at any cutscene with Emilia or Ulrika and you'll see what I'm talking about. The last thing to mention here would be the new designs for some characters. This is more of a subjective thing, but honestly, I do think most of these are better than their previous versions. My favorites here would probably be Catra, Aaron, and Rin. All of these outfits fit their respective character to a T. You can tell that a lot of effort went into designing them. I'm kinda sad that Swin and Nadia didn't get new outfits, but maybe they decided to save them for Horizon 2. I really hope that's the case. That should be everything about the presentation. Well, I guess I could technically ask for more. It still bothers me how much dialogue in these games is not voiced. It's not as bad in Horizon as say Cold Steel 4, where Rin for some reason didn't speak during the final bonding event, but it can still be improved. A lot of connection events only have voices for the final dialogue lines, and plenty of normal dialogues don't have voices either. But I don't want to complain about this. I understand that Falcom is a relatively small company and that the Trails games don't really sell that much. Overall, I'd say they delivered in presentation, even if like I said, the soundtrack could have been a bit better. The visuals especially deserve praise. I mean, there's S-Crafts here that look better than the ultimate attacks from the big gacha games. Falcom is out here with a small team and limited resources creating better animations and VFX than companies who make billions of dollars every year. That's absolutely crazy. Well, here we are. The main reason why most people love this series. The writing, the characters, the relationships, personalities and goals, the dialogues, the setting, the conflicts, the themes. The story in general is what I'm going to talk about here, and this is going to be the longest section, so buckle up. I'm going to first go through each act and route in the game and talk about them. I won't delve too deep into the details in this part. This is mostly just so you can understand my first impressions and what I was thinking and feeling while playing the game, what I enjoyed, what I didn't like, etc. After I'm done with the whole story, then I'll talk about the whys. An actual reviewer would probably do a better job of structuring this, but I am not one, so expect some repetition or talking about stuff out of order. And I'll try my hardest to not make this part where I go through each route pointless by just vaguely explaining what happens. Like I said, I'll focus on how I felt playing. But I believe that seeing the game laid out in this way will help you understand my points later, so I wouldn't recommend you skip it. I don't think I need to remind you, but this video will spoil the entire story from start to finish. Stop watching immediately if you haven't beaten the game yet. Anyway, let's start on the prologue. The prologue is really strong. I'd say the only issue it has is that it's too good in fact. See, nowadays, games love to open straight into action because the average attention span is getting lower and lower. But me complaining about the prologue having too much action would make me sound insane, and I think it's looking too deep into it. Truly, I have no issues with it. It sets the tone for the game immediately, and clearly shows what the main conflict is going to be. It introduces you to most of the main characters from all three routes. It's not too bloated with tutorials, but does a great job of teaching you how the combat system and the new mechanics work. It's filled with cool character interactions, which is one of the best parts about Trails. The opening is good too. I didn't enjoy it too much on the first listen, but it grows on you. Playing through it, I could feel myself getting even more hyped about the game. I can't see any flaws in the prologue, and I don't think it's worth it to delve too deep into it, so let's move on. Act 1 starts and the pace slows down to a grinding halt. For the third game in a row, we're still in the same city, doing the same quests, with the same group of people. But I understand that it's the first part of a first act, and I was still carrying the hype from the prologue and the opening, so I wasn't complaining too much. Act 1 is divided into 3 parts, the first one being the morning segment. The story section here involves discovering the contamination on the western outskirts of Edith. Surprisingly similar to Corrosion, I thought. We also go to the president's house, but nothing important happens there. By the way, I'll also talk about connection events in this part of the video. For this first segment of Act 1, none of them are really interesting though. Don't really have much to say about them. Overall, I'd call this segment a slow start. Agnes leaves the party and Elaine joins, and with it starts the afternoon segment. Still in Edith, with another set of new side quests. Except now, we get a call telling us that the garden has been hacked yet again. I didn't know until this moment that Horizon also had the garden, and let me tell you, I was not happy. Exploring Edith for the third game in a row and doing more side quests might have been starting to get repetitive, but at least there was some interesting stuff there. The garden is, in all the games it's been in, pretty much complete filler, but there was no way I was going to skip content, so I obviously did it. The connection events here are a lot better though. There's a glimpse of Agnes's feelings, which come into play later in the game. Judy's event is pretty funny, and Elaine's shows that she's still guilty about her family but trying to move forward. I enjoyed all three. The story section here is about investigating the many disappearances happening across Edith. We fight the monster that's supposedly behind them, but the monster obviously escapes. I was pretty excited here because it seemed like we were going to finally get Reset's backstory down the line. Nothing interesting really happens in Chardin, but at least it's a new area. The night segment starts after the play in the theater. This is the best segment of Act 1, and where things seem to finally pick up. The cutscene on Montmartre is a good start. Nothing important happens, but it has plenty of great character interactions. The exploration and side quest segment is with Jorda, and she makes it so much better. I did not expect her to join the party, and the way she comments on a lot of stuff while you walk around the city is great. We also finally get to see Yunka Fai, and the dialogue is pretty funny. Speaking of funny, there's another segment in the garden. Normally that would suck, but we finally get to see Ulrika. I didn't know it was possible to both hate a character and think she's hilarious, but here we are. For connection events, I enjoyed Nina's. Nina's event has a lot of backstory, shows her passion about film and how she feels conflicted about her two lives, and even foreshadows future events. The story segment here is where actual things start happening. Though the scene with Agnes entering the tower turns out to be incredibly important, when I played it, I kinda glossed over it. Some people might hate to see that bum Jeffrey again, but hey, I enjoy when they don't just throw away NPCs. We learn about why Jorda is alone, and we have one of the coolest party compositions in the game. At the end, we see that the cult is being recycled. Not too big of a fan of that. But the Grendel makes a return, and anytime the Grendel is on screen, I'm hyped. An awesome transformation, both in story and in gameplay. After the fight, Van manages to bring back Jeffrey, and I quite like this cutscene because it seems like a callback to the beginning of Azure where Lloyd tries to bring back Ernest from the demon form. It's a bit of recycling again, but I did enjoy it. Ix appears, but doesn't really do anything, and the act finishes shortly after that. A lot of questions and not really many answers, but it's Act 1, so it's not a big deal. I was still pretty hyped, so I immediately started Act 2. Overall, Act 1 wasn't too bad, but it definitely could have been better, or at the very least, trimmed a bit. By the way, I played the routes in order from top to bottom, so next is Route 1. Anytime the greatest character in gaming history, Rin Schwarzer, is on the screen, is a good time. So naturally, I was really excited to play as Class 7 again, though I thought that for Rin and Kevin's routes, we wouldn't have to do side quests. Unfortunately, that is not the case. Yet again, I needed to explore a city that I had already seen before, do more side quests that aren't really all that great, and another floor of the garden. Well, at least we were not in Edith anymore. All the connection events here are good, but the one Crows hits you with a Reverie soundtrack, so it's an automatic win. For the story segment, this is just pure shonen. Emilia's entrance is awesome and the fight is really cool too, but story-wise, there's not much here. We learn about the true name of the project, and the main question in my mind was, why do they need weapons in space? Overall, a decent route. Van Route 1 starts, and guess what? Yes, more Edith, more side quests, and more garden. The connection events are really good at least. Resets shows us a bit of her backstory. In Katras, we can see his struggle with his gender and sexuality and coming out through his friends. And in Season As, we get to meet a new character called Kaede. Bermotis was just fine though. The story segment here, I had no words while playing it. The auction already started pretty hilarious with fun shenanigans, but once Rosalie appeared I couldn't stop laughing. I fully agree with Aaron's reaction there, but that's about everything good in this route. The ending just boils down to, we get the replica genesis, we learn the name of the new cult, and Campanella declares that Ouroboros is doing stuff, which was already pretty much a given. This was probably the weakest route in the game, but I wasn't feeling too down because there was some genuinely funny moments, and I knew that Kevin was up next. Kevin Route 1 was great. I loved the picnic in front so much. They were easily my favorite group in Reverie, and it's so nice to see them all together again. They're always really fun to watch and play as. I'm especially a big fan of the new Swin who doesn't get flustered by Nadia. We barely got to see him since this development happened near the end of Daybreak 2, and it's great character evolution. Anyway, more for species, more garden, and more exploring an area we've seen before. It didn't bother me too much this time, since Starbat is probably my favorite area in Calvard. The connection events were fine, mostly carried by the fact that the characters involved are all amazing. Lapis's is probably my favorite, with her expression of identity. I love the quote, "I am me, but is that enough?" When it comes to the actual story part, this is a really strong showing. I was really surprised to see Kevin use Nina's eyes, even more surprised to see that he was the final boss of the route, and the revelation that Hamilton fixed the Oasis by somehow messing with the causality. This route got me back into hype mode. The hype didn't last too long, as I was forced into a garden intermission. It wasn't too bad. We learn what Ouroboros are after inside the garden, we learn about Simeon's name and his abilities, and Ulrika appears to make the scene 10 times funnier. But yeah, overall this intermission stopped the flow of the story in its tracks, and I didn't enjoy it too much. Luckily, next up is Rin Route 2. This is easily one of the best routes in the game, if not the best. Though even this one has more side quests and more garden. Getting tired yet? Believe it or not, I still wasn't too tired of it by this point. The connection events here are fine, though I really enjoyed Crows in particular. It was nice learning what went down in Jurai. But the real reason why this route is fantastic is obviously the story section. The reveal that the sky is false made so much sense, and the fact that Crow and Rin can see the true sky because they were there in Cold Steel 4's normal ending was a great callback. I also love how Celis and Leon were handled here. After playing Kevin's route, you expect them to be on his side and a boss fight to happen in the church, but surprise, they actually joined the party. The design of the dungeon here is also lovely. I was expecting technology again, so it was nice to have something different. But obviously, the best part here comes once you enter the final room. I was fully seated for all the reveals, and there were plenty. The fact that Hamilton's plan has been going on for 20 years or more, and the confirmation that the sky is fake. But before more can be said, Shizuna, Kincaid, Ashlat, and Kurogane appear, and that's when I stand up. This boss fight is crazy in every possible way. And the cutscene after is jaw-dropping too. The visuals, the animation, the choreography, the music, perfect in every possible way. It's too short for my liking, but it doesn't even matter because after it the reveals keep coming. That there's something behind the canopy that Rin and Crow saw, and that Hamilton has been tampering with telescopes all around the continent to hide the true sky. And the hype doesn't stop either. I did not expect Mint to do all that. Seeing Rin and Crow calling their Mexican brought a tear to my eye, and Kincaid acknowledging that Hamilton is a threat to their blinds was great too. I was moved, I was hyped again, I was excited to keep playing. Van Route 2 starts, and I'm immediately stopping my tracks by a solid 3 hours of even more edits and even more side quests. Funnily enough, this segment had some at least interesting side quests, and it had no garden. But this is when I really started to get tired of this. Yes, maybe part of it is my fault for talking to every single NPC. But for one, I paid $60 for the game, so I'm obviously going to do everything I can. And for two, this wasn't an issue in previous Trails games, at least to me. But now, it was starting to get annoying. The connection events were amazing though. I cannot believe that the lanes wasn't part of the main story. That is legitimately one of the best moments in the game. Yumes was really cute, and I have a feeling it's going to be a key part of Horizon 2. Ren's was fantastic too. It reminded me of the Shera and Olivia daydream in Reverie, and it showed how much the people in Ouroboros cared about Ren. For the story segment, it starts off with a talk with Alistat that doesn't really tell us much, and then the Blacklight district gets attacked. Attacked by who? Well, not really anyone. Just that half of the people there have been mind controlled by the contamination. Let me tell you, I was rolling my eyes at this. First the Traction Zero, then the Erebonian Course, then the masks, 2 eyes, then the corrosion, and now the contamination. All very similar and starting to get repetitive. Nothing important really happens here, up until the Memorial Park. The dialogue with the police, Heiyue, and the guild and the main party working together was kinda cool, can't even lie about it. The cutscene before the X-boss fight was the real highlight here. Both Jordan and Van really delivered here. The cutscene after the boss fight wasn't anything too special though. The vestiges finally introduced themselves, but we don't learn anything. I did however like that Jordan actually acted before they teleported away. It's common in this series for villains to just teleport away unscathed while the main party does nothing. Overall, not the best route, but the reveal of the vestiges had me intrigued and wanting to know more. There's not much to say about 95% of Van Route 3. It's more Edith, more side quests, and more garden. And the connection events aren't too special either. Not bad, but not amazing. So let's focus on the remaining 5% here. I really enjoyed the ending of this route. The music is great. Agnes and Van's VAs killed it. And the writing was incredible too. Also, I am on Team Elaine, but you know, that's neither here nor there. This scene gets so much better after beating the game, but even then while playing it, I was moved. I was spoiled that this would happen, though to be fair, you could see it coming from a mile away. But I still love the whole scene. The way Agnes pours her heart out and Van's answers are just really well written. Given the age gap there were many ways this could have gone wrong or felt weird. But it didn't. It reminded me of Altina's bonding event at the end of Cold Steel 4, where I didn't have high hopes, but it totally delivered. Oh yeah, I guess there was an Nina scene after that too. It was good too, but my mind was still stuck on how great the previous part was. This ending wakes up from having me spend one more time doing sideways in Edith, and I overall enjoyed this route. You know, I really feel like Falcom should have swapped the routes in this part around, because Van Route 4 is the third Van route in a row, at least the way I played it, which is how I imagine most people play the game. It's not that I dislike the arc resolution Steam, but obviously having some variety would have been better. Anyway, I hate repeating myself, but yes, more side quests, more NPCs, and more garden. But at the very least we need a new spot, one that hasn't appeared in previous games. Though to be honest, it's not really that original of a place. It's kind of similar to Edith's Old Town in style. The connection events were a bit mixed. I enjoyed Trent's event, but I really liked Agnes's. The extra Van backstory was a treat. The story segment was really weak though. More contamination, yet another secret lab from Almata, and to top it all off, we pretty much get confirmation that the vestiges are dead people from the past. So just recycling and more recycling. The only highlight here is a short skin where Yunka 5 farms a bit of aura, and that's it. I was feeling pretty disappointed by now, and honestly, looking back with the whole picture, this might be the worst route in the game. But the picnicking front is back to save the day with Kevin route 2. I laughed so much with the initial scenes here. Kevin just fits so well with Rufus and the others. And because I did Punch route first, there's no garden to do here. Lovely. There's still side quests and NPCs to talk to though, but like I said, I enjoy Tharbat, so it didn't bother me. Plus, the story segment here is really long and really good. But first, the connection events, which were overall great. Rufus's showed us his new purpose in life and a bit more insight into his thoughts. Swin's played a rendition of Cry For Me, so that's an automatic win. And Nadia's was weaker, but it works because it shows that her and Swin are always in sync, because they both said similar things to Kevin. Back to the story though, like I said, it was great. First, the talk with everyone at the hotel. It really felt like through the laughs, each party was trying to hide their secrets. The talk with the AI below Vegas films didn't reveal too much, but it wasn't bad. And the dialogue when they left the basement was hilarious too. But the real star here is what happens at the tower. I did not expect that reveal at all. Hamilton getting the water from the future was crazy to learn, and a bit confusing, because if there's no future there in the first place, how could she get water from it? Or was there a future there, but it stopped existing because actions across Simuria moved the reset day forward? Not fully sure, but I mean, I was jumping around while playing this. And then, when I thought it couldn't get crazier, boom, Nina appeared. An amazing route overall, and I might even like it more than Rin Route 2. Back into hype mode. I think you might be starting to see a pattern here, but I will talk about it further down the line. Van Route 5 starts, and we're still in Anchorville. More NPCs, more side quests, and unfortunately, more Garden 2. This game is a roller coaster, and I wouldn't really say in a good way. A couple of connection events stood out, Reset and Katras. Resets got us more backstory and some questions about identity and humanity, and Katras continued to explore his gender and sexuality. The story segment here was pretty long and action-packed, but I wasn't too into it. By this point, I was thinking the Vestige's actions started to seem pretty random and without a general purpose, just normal villain stuff. And the reveals at the end weren't all that. It was pretty obvious that those two were the Tyrant and Giacomo. Though the one highlight here is that the Tyrant's design is awesome. He's like Aaron, but older and cooler. But yet again, we see another scene where the villains just teleport away. At least, the last few lines were cool and left me thinking about the President's plans. I feel like with every route, I have less and less to say, and this mirrors what I was feeling back then while playing this. My mind was filled with thoughts. One, because there were so many unanswered questions, and two, because I didn't know how much I was enjoying the game. I was thinking that so far, it hadn't moved me like I expected it would, and that in the end, it was likely it would all come down to the ending. But anyway, this is a discussion for after I'm done retelling the story. This is the last set of routes, starting with Rin Route 3. I don't think I need to repeat what I first did before the story segment. At least there was no garden. Cool. I've got nothing to say about the connection events, they were pretty unremarkable. So let's skip straight to the story. We first get a bit more information about Project Startaker, but the real treat here is the closure of Jean and Walter's stories. Jean finally accepts the test rank promotion, and they both pay their respects to their master. Amazing to see this so long after the events of Sky SC. Anyway, nothing of relevance happens until the final battle. I was pretty disappointed to see that Shizuna wasn't there, and also confused. The battle between Shizuna and Rin seemed like a key plot point of the game, and I assumed it would happen here. I also didn't understand why Rin and Yunka 5 needed to fight here. But the fight is really cool, and so is the cutscene after. Except when Ariok and Olympia show up for no reason. Great, more recycling. The route ends with the reveal that Yunka 5 is on Hamilton's side, and a cliffhanger for the rocket launch. This got me really hyped up for the ending, because I was wondering what part Rin's team would play there since they were so far away from the rocket, and Shizuna was nowhere to be seen. Clearly, I lack critical information. Overall, the route wasn't bad, but I was expecting so much more here. The second to last route of the game is Van Route 6. So, how do you follow up the cliffhanger from Rin's route? It starts with a 30-minute string of dialogues that doesn't really tell much, and then more Anchorville, more side quests, and more Garden of course. This one really hurt. I wasn't happy at all. You can't just go from the second before the rocket launches back to 4 hours before it and expect me to do so much side content. At least one of the side quests was good. The one about Sunshine and Yes was really interesting. I also think it's funny that they give you one of the most broken accessories in the game, but you don't get to play as Yes anymore. The connection events here are the last in the game. I quite enjoyed both of them. A bit more insight into Shizuna's role and backstory, and Jorda's struggles. Awesome stuff all around. For the story here, it was nice to see Harwood again. He's easily the best villain of the Calvart arc. But the dialogue with him didn't reveal much. Even now, after beating the game, I still do not understand what the messages were after. I'm skipping Pandemonium because I did not care for it. But when entering the city's hall, I was a bit excited. It seemed like we were finally getting the full reset backstory and development. This was the third time she froze up during a fight, and surely the third time's a charm. Well, nothing. But at least the dungeon is really cool, and the OST is one of my favorite songs in the game. I reached the end of the dungeon, and before the boss, I already deduced, not that it was hard to see, that the Apostle is Melchior. Considering that at this point I pretty much knew that Gramhart's plan wasn't evil and Hamilton isn't really a villain, that leaves us with a cast of villains fully recycled. Lovely. The dialogue after the boss is filled with revelations, which I normally really enjoy, but it is incredibly confusing. Like I said before, I still don't understand why Hamilton summoned the Vestiges, or why she chose them in particular, or why she would let them run rampant across Calvart. Also, the reveal that Agnes lied and actually wanted to go to Edith just didn't really hit me. Overall, the route wasn't bad, but just like Rin's route, I expected more. Finally, we reach the final route before the ending, Kevin Route 3. It starts off really strong. I never thought we would visit the remains of Krail Village. Plus, there's no side quests, no connection events, no NPCs, and no garden. Getting straight to the point, I love it. But a few minutes in, I get angry. Why are Zita, Ashen, Risha, and so many other people there at that specific moment? Well, turns out they have no real reason. I thought they would be there to protect Hamilton, but they just give a bunch of half-ass excuses and start a fight. A fight after which they just go, well okay, you can proceed now. What even was the point of this? Anyway, exploring Krail Village and seeing everyone's thoughts was great too. So was Lapis traveling back into the past, after which she finally realized what her emotions were. The final area is also really cool. Yes, it's kinda recycled, but the song is really good and the atmosphere is fantastic, so I let it slide. I was pretty hyped to see what the conclusion would be here. Hearing the humming on the wind as I got closer to the end made me emotional. Autumn Knows is an amazing song. However, much like Rin's route, this also ended in disappointment. No new answers were gained, and it ended in a very similar cliffhanger. At this moment, most people would have been excited to see the finale, but I was afraid, because I'd been in this position before. Being extremely hyped for a game that I'd waited for so long, that promised to bring everything together, Kingdom Hearts 3, Xenoblade 3, and even Trails of Cold Steel 4, and every single time, I'd come out of these experiences with disappointment, obviously to varying degrees. There were so many things the ending of Horizon needed to do for me to finish the game and be happy after how unremarkable the game had been up to this point. Not that it was bad, it just wasn't the life-changing masterpiece that other people and the game itself promised. Overall, Kevin Route 3 was great, but at this point my eyes were fixed on the end. The finale is here. After a really long sequence of dialogues, we arrive at Bandale District. For some reason, even now at the finale, instead of going straight to the action, there's more NPCs to talk to and events to check out. Luckily, this doesn't take that long, and so begins the infiltration into the presidential office building. We reach Ren, and I really enjoy the sequence of her hacking into the system. All of those barriers were level 3, which take around 10 buttons in a row, so it really puts into perspective how superhuman her abilities are. After that, a really funny scene happens at the door of the elevator leading to the basement. First up, the fact that Shizuna was camping there for the whole morning had me dying. I already knew from the second she appeared that would be the case. Second, 99 Gales might be the best ability name in the game. Having played the Cold Steel games where a single Gale was already incredibly strong, 99 of them is just hilarious. However, after I've stopped laughing, I started to be afraid again. Her being here means that she isn't near Rin, meaning there's no way the battle between them can happen, which is one of the main things I was expecting. Anyway, we reach the final dungeon, and though the OST is fantastic, I can't help but feel a little disappointed in the design. I mean, the two previous games had crazy dungeons created by the Genesis. This is just a bunker, and the enemies are just robots and people, not cool monsters. I'm going to skip over Cody and Kayla because there just wasn't much there. Mirabel's encounter on the other hand was a lot better. Finally, we learn where Reset came from, and how Marduk has been improving their technology so fast. After the fight, we also learn that Agnes is indeed working with Hamilton in a plan that probably involves her sacrificing herself in some way by how she sounded. The end is near and I'm feeling excited, and then boom, a call from Mr. Sacred telling us that there's more garden to be done. Yes, more garden right before the final boss. Unbelievable. At least it was pretty cool. I can't believe it made me like Novartis as a character. I didn't like him at all before that, but the revelation that all this time he was trying to confirm that he was a student of you-know-who was incredible. I still don't understand what the abyssal stratum is supposed to be though, and the whole section was a bit confusing. But we got confirmation that Simuria is stuck in a time loop, and the Grandmaster's appearance was a long time coming. Also, Pain of Memories might just be the best song in the game. But the fact that she appeared here probably meant that she wouldn't appear during the actual ending of the game. Even more reasons to make me scared that the ending would disappoint me. But it was finally time to confront it. Before even walking into the trigger for the final sequence, I could already see Alexander and Viola, which already put me in a bad mood. Gramhart comes in strong. I already liked him as a character, but the ending made him even better. But with his first dialogue, I was already confused, and I still am. I thought the Vestiges were summoned by Hamilton, but now they're saying they were summoned because the Subterranean of Time was about to be destroyed. We get confirmation that the Subterranean of Time is beyond the barrier in space, keeping Simuria in a time loop, which wasn't hard to deduce before this, so not exactly new info. Yet the game treats it like a huge reveal. Like we didn't know that Ouroboros' plan was called the Eternal Recurrence Plan since many games ago, or that the Genesis were tied to the Septerion. After a bit more dialogue, we end up fighting Casim, Kincaid and the other two. And I'm really confused as to why we're fighting them. We know that Gramhart is trying to save humanity, and it's not like his plan has any downsides. If it works, then everything is okay. Also, I highly doubt that there's any way we can interfere with Project Startaker all the way from Edith. So why are we fighting? Anyway, the fight is pretty cool, but less cool than the one at the end of Ring Route 2. After the battle, the rocket finally launches, and with it, all three routes converge at the same point in time. We finally see the cube that appeared in the cover of the game. I was wondering when that would come into play. And I mean, I was hyped up here. The whole sequence is amazing. The battle in space with a mech, fighting a treasure of the goddess with nuclear weapons born from humanity, just awesome stuff all around. The Subterranean is defeated, and I mean, I don't think anyone expected this to be true. But what I didn't expect was a shadow clone of something similar to Ishmelga combined with Zoa Gilstein to appear. Cool. The reveal that they lost because they connected the Genesis to Marduk's AI was also great, and it made so much sense. We knew from Daybreak 2 that they were connected to the Septerion. Still hyped, and even more with the scene after. It is revealed that Kincaid is also part of Hamilton's plans, and he transforms to a Grendel. But again, I did not and still do not understand the need to fight her. It's not like Kincaid has betrayed humanity, or even Gramhart, and nothing stopping him from just teleporting away, which he does do after the fight. So the final boss, while it was really cool visually and thematically, doesn't really make much sense. Anyway, after the fight now comes the actual ending. And considering how little time is left, all I'm thinking is that there's probably going to be a lot unsaid, and that what's probably going to happen is indeed Agnes sacrificing herself in some way. And that was mostly accurate. But the whole sequence there is amazing. I loved everyone telling Agnes not to go through with the plan. It was extremely emotional. And the reveal of why she wore her Skulu uniform back in Band Route 3 made me sad. Fantastic work from all the BAs too, and the music was great. Agnes transforms and resets all of Simuria, supposedly to a time not too long ago, and that's how the game ends. The ending left me stunned, and I'm honestly still a bit stunned. But as you might have guessed from how I've been talking about it, I was indeed disappointed too. I could say more about the ending, and I will, be patient. Again, kinda screwed up with the structure of the video because some things will be repeated, but it is what it is. So, now that I've talked about the game from start to finish, and you understand how I felt while playing it, let's move on to the next segment of the review. Here's where I will talk about all the issues I have with the game. First off, a warning. This section isn't going to have any positives. This is a Falcom game, and I don't think I need to mention everything that makes it great. Because a lot of what makes Horizon good was already in the previous titles. The character interactions, the cohesion, how natural dialogues feel, the stories, the world. I'd rather focus on what I didn't like and what they did wrong, because I think that's more important. But let's stop beating around the bush, and since I just talked about the ending, I might as well start there. A bit out of order, I know. It is undeniable that the game spent all of its runtime building up for the ending, and when a game does that, it better be amazing. So how was the ending? It was great, but I don't understand why I see so many people saying it's the best cliffhanger this series has had. I think this is the worst cliffhanger this series has had, so far, at least in my opinion. What made the endings of Sky First, Cold Steel 1 and Cold Steel 3 special was that they came out of nowhere. Not in a million years could I have expected that Wiseman reveal and Joshua leaving, or the invasion of Tristan the Divine Knights appearing, or Rin going berserk and losing. In comparison, the ending of Horizon is mostly expected. The reset happening, not hard to deduce, considering there's no way that Gramhart's plan succeeds, Ouroboros are working on an Eternal Recurrence plan, we know the Subterranean of Time is the one for this arc, and in the garden segment before the end, we literally learn that Simuria is stuck in a time loop. This is why I don't think me being spoiled about the reset at the end mattered. Also, back in Daybreak 2, before I even got spoiled, I already expected some sort of big reset. I thought that was why so many people hated the game. I figured that they were saying the game had no progression because it would all be reset at the end. Obviously, that didn't happen, but the concept was already in my mind. But I digress. What about Agnes' sacrifice? Not too hard to expect, because there was plenty of foreshadowing with revisit to Trion Tower, plus her comments about the angel statue on Central March, and the angel feathers on the opening of the game. I was kinda disappointed that she didn't have angel wings in the ending. Oh, and also at the end of One Route 6, Melchior straight up just says that Agnes is involved in Hamilton's plans, and we know that they're probably not good. But none of those really matter that much. What matters is that you know that something insane is going to happen, because the whole game, from the moment you start it, builds up to that ending. In Skyfirst and Cold Steel 1, there's no build-up. These are the first game of their sagas, you don't expect such insane things to happen. And then out of nowhere, bam, you get hit with pure insanity. That is not the case here. Now, I'm not saying that the ending is bad, far from it. You already know how I felt while playing it, if you've watched the previous section. It's fantastic, the final boss is incredible, the Battle of Emilia against Asperterion is awesome, how it shows everyone's perspective of the launch, and seeing the routes converge is great. This ending is also special because it shows Agnes doing exactly what she prevented Van from doing in Daybreak 1, a sacrifice to save the world. I hope you heard those air quotes, because that's another issue I have with the ending. They piled on even more questions than I already had in those final 5 minutes. Why did Yume's eyes turn purple? How far back did we go? What exactly did Agnes do? And why could it only be her? What does Tuner Diva even mean? If they can hack the Septerion with a Genesis, how come they can only slightly prevent a reset? One big issue that I personally have with games is that I cannot fully enjoy them while I'm trying to understand exactly what's going on. And there was a lot of confusing stuff here. I can't turn off my brain from trying to figure out the answers, and while I'm doing that, I can't focus on enjoying what's happening. The last issue I have with the ending is that I expected more, and the game led me to expect more. I hate how little some groups and organizations mattered. I thought the ending would be a culmination of all the important factions realizing their plans. But in the end, only Hamilton and Gramhart did something. The Church and Ouroboros did nothing, and neither did Kevin or Rin's teams. The cover art of the game made me believe Nina and the Grandmaster matter a lot, only for them to pretty much do absolutely nothing of relevance. I didn't expect much from Kevin's team, but I sure did from Rin's. From the prologue, we knew that he's the one that will open a path to the land where the heavens turn, and that he needs to fight the Black God to find the touch within him. None of those things happened, and neither did many others. Shizuna, nothing. Mer only showed up so Van could go Grendel. This last one really does piss me off. In the prospect of a grand reset caused by the Septerion of Time, what does the Holy Mist of Time do? Pretty much nothing. Overall, to me it feels like a lot of what makes this ending good is the presentation, and the fact that it's higher stakes than anything we've seen before in the series. Not necessarily because of what's happening or how it's written. Again, not that those two aspects are bad, but Horizon's ending to me just doesn't reach the same peaks I know from Cold Steel 1 and Sky First endings. While I'm still at the ending, there's one more thing I want to say about it. Because a big part of what makes a JRPG's ending good is the final dungeon. The OST here was incredible, but the actual dungeon itself, not so much. The previous two games had amazing final dungeons. The designs of the Genesis Tower and the Octradius are insane, but this is just a bunker. And the colors don't stand out at all, it's just grey and silver all around with a tiny bit of blue and red sprinkled in. The enemy designs are also really weak in comparison, it's just members of Marduk and Hercules and a few robots. Some are even recolors from previous games, and the final dungeon is not the place where you want to be recycling stuff. What pisses me off though, is that this was a conscious choice, because it's not like they were forced into making the final dungeon a bunker. It's very simple, there are two dungeons in this game, the one in the prologue and the one in Band Route 1, that are generated as an illusion on top of an existing structure, whether by AR technology or with Campanella's powers plus an altar core. There's literally no reason why Falcom couldn't use that same reasoning to change the bunker to whatever they wanted to. Gramhart is in possession of the Genesis and Marduk's technology. He could do it if he wanted to. If they wanted to write in a proper reason, then just have the team find the plans for the bunker while investigating the presidential office, only for the structure to change once they get down there. That would have been awesome, and way better than what we got. It's not like the final dungeon can make or break a game, but I think it's pretty important, and I'm disappointed in what we got here. Mainly because I know Falcom can do so much better. The sealed area, the Azure Tree, the Infernal Castle, etc. All of these designs are close to iconic to me, and the bunker in Horizon just does not compare. That should be everything I wanted to say about the ending. Now, let's talk about another issue that's honestly been a part of other previous Trails games, but one that really came to the forefront in Horizon. Let's talk about structure, and let's start with a comparison. What made Reverie stand out was that it replaced the filler or side quest with a Reverie corridor. That is not the case in Horizon or Daybreak 2. Not only do you have side quests, but you also have the garden. And I'm going to be honest here, this did not bother me in Daybreak 2, because going into it, I knew that the game was widely considered a filler game, and I had low expectations. But Horizon is obviously different. This isn't known as a filler game, this is known as one of the best Trails games, and the way it marketed itself led me to believe it would be similar to Reverie. Imagine my surprise when I saw that this game also had both side quests and the garden. But honestly, my main issue here isn't even that the game has both. It's that the garden just isn't good. Or at least, I don't think it's better than the Reverie corridor. The corridor had way better rewards, minigames, daydreams. It was also structured way better. You only had to visit it 3 to 4 times in the entire game, way less than in Horizon. Not to mention, the combat system in Reverie is a lot faster thanks to United Fronts, and you didn't have to get an S rank on a level by doing a bunch of annoying stuff. Whenever I had to visit the corridor, I was annoyed, yes, but it wasn't the end of the world. In Horizon, getting a call to enter the garden is disheartening. But I said this section was about structure, so let's focus on that. This might just be the biggest issue in the game, and like I've said, I've seen it before in other games. One big problem I have with video games is that I do not like at all when I can see the structure behind them. This tends to happen more often in games that tend to repeat themselves. Let me give you an example. A lot of people really enjoy Sky SC. but it's one of my least favorite Trails games because of the issue I mentioned before. Let me explain before you shoot me. The first 4 chapters of the game can be defined as reach a new area, look around for members of Ouroboros, and once you find them, they run away. And the first 4 chapters composed the first half of the game. When I reached chapter 4, I already knew what would happen. The same that had happened on the previous 3. Just like that, my immersion is broken. I can see the underlying structure behind the game, and I'm immediately taken out of it. Like I said, this issue happens on a lot of Trails games, to varying degrees. A good chunk of Cold Steel 4's Act 2 is do side content and then go rescue someone. Cold Steel 2's Act 1 can be boiled down to go meet your party members and then fight members of the Noble Alliance. Back again in Sky SC, Chapter 7 is just go to a tower, climb through the dungeon, then fight a member of Ouroboros. 4 times! You might now be wondering about Cold Steel 1 and 3. Funnily enough, while I did see the structure in those games, it didn't bother me or break my immersion. Why? For one, because both of these take place in a high school setting. What's the first word that comes to mind when you think of high school? To me, it's repetitive. Every single day was the same, so having a repetitive structure in these games didn't bother me in the slightest, because it makes total sense. But secondly, and more importantly, it's because to me, the cycles were longer. The structures I mentioned before weren't really a problem because they were repeating, or to put it in another way, they formed a cycle. They were a problem because they only had 1 or 2 steps before returning to the start and repeating again. If I look at Cold Steel 1, the cycle would be school day, then free day, then practical exam, then field study, and the cycle repeats after that. You may now be thinking, well, you just made up a bunch of divisions, when in reality you could simplify it as side content, then main story. You're not wrong, but like I said, this is fully based on vibes. This is how I saw the games while playing them, and how they felt to me. And while I didn't see that simplified cycle in those games, I could see it clearly while playing Horizon. Nearly every single route in this game is just side content into main story. And to make matters worse, the side content makes up around 70% of that cycle. There's no intertwining, no attempt to try a different order like placing the story stuff first and then the side content. Or maybe having a few routes without any sort of side content. That happens once in the game, in Cabin Route 3, and it felt so nice to have a different structure for at least one route. For all the others, I knew how the route would play out. Every time I saw that route end message, I knew that no matter what happened, I was going back to side content. The cycles were as clear as day, and they happened across pretty much the entire game. I haven't seen many people complain about this game, but the few that I've seen were mainly talking about filler. To me, that is not the issue here, or at least it doesn't tell the full story. Every single Trails game except Reverie and Sky Third has side quests, and they weren't a problem. It's the combination of the excessive side content by having both side quests and the garden, and the incredibly rigid structures the game has. I think that's the best way to put what, in my opinion, is the main issue the game has. That issue on its own is already bad, but like I said, it's present in a few other Trails games. But here, it is intensified by the next problem I had with the game, and it's that the whole story felt like it was just building up for the ending. Throughout all of its runtime, it just keeps adding on more and more people and questions, and not giving many answers. It wants you to push through and see what lies at the end, but this is in complete contrast to the actual structure of the game. So you have a game that keeps egging you on and hyping up the finale, but that also wants you to take it slow with plenty of side quests, NPCs to talk to, and garden filler. People criticize Daybreak 2 for being a filler game that had no reason to exist, but to me, Horizon only feels like it has one reason to exist, and that's not much better. To me, it feels like the game only cares about the ending, like the only reason it was developed was to properly set up Horizon 2, because Daybreak 2 obviously didn't do that. We know for a fact that Daybreak 2 wasn't supposed to exist, and I really feel like Horizon has suffered from it. It feels bad to say, but in the end, it was Falcom's choice to release Daybreak 2. Nothing stopped them from not releasing it, even if it meant breaking a tradition. Or they could have at least changed the story of the game so Horizon didn't suffer from it. I can admit that part of the issue I mentioned above, where the game pushes you to reach the ending, might have just been a personal thing. After all, I heard a lot of good things about the game before its release, and I was really hyped. But even with that, I can't say that the issue lies only with me. From the very start of the game, you learn about the rocket launch, and halfway through the prologue, you see the phases of the project. And it doesn't take a genius to understand that the important one will probably be the first manned flight, and you look forward to that. At least, I did. I knew that was probably going to be the ending, and I wanted to see it. Another thing at play here are expectations. If the game was called Daybreak 3 and had a different cover art, maybe I would have seen it differently. Maybe the long side content sections wouldn't have bothered me as much, and I wouldn't have been looking towards the end so much. You can't judge a book by its cover, but this is a video game. When the game is called Trails Beyond the Horizon, you see Space and Nina and the Grandmaster on the cover art, and everyone says the game is a masterpiece, you don't expect this game to be 70% side content. I sure didn't. I expected it to go crazy and to change my life after playing it. And not only did everyone on social media who had already played it say that it's a masterpiece, but they specifically mentioned the ending as being the apex of the art form. How could I not be hyped? How was I supposed to stay focused on what was happening instead of the future? Honestly, I am really glad that Horizon 2 will be a worldwide release, because it means that everyone will be able to play the game at the same time. No expectations and no chance of spoilers. Earlier, I compared Horizon to Reverie, which makes sense because both are modern Trails games with multiple routes. But in a way, at least to me, it also makes sense to compare Horizon to Cold Steel 3. Now that I know how Horizon is structured, I think it's a better comparison to make. Cold Steel 3 to me worked 1,000 times better, and not only because of the structure or because it didn't have a garden, it's because the ending isn't in sight until the very end. You are encouraged to take your time and enjoy the game at your own pace. There's no Project Star Trek driving you forward, just a looming sense of danger on the horizon. It still works to increase tension, but it doesn't set you on high speed. And let's not forget, Cold Steel 3 is a new beginning. It has new graphics, new gameplay, new areas, new party members. There's been a time skip and everything has changed, and the game wants you to take your time getting reacquainted. When I got dropped in Leaves, I looked around, explored, learned the map because I knew I would spend a lot of time there. In Horizon, you get dropped in Edith, and I know Edith by heart now. I could walk around it with my eyes closed. And every other aspect I mentioned before that makes Cold Steel 3 different from Cold Steel 2 doesn't really apply here. The game is in many ways just an upgraded version of Daybreak 2. My point here is that Trails Beyond the Horizon isn't slow enough to be a Cold Steel 3, and yet it isn't fast enough to be a Reverie. It's sitting in a weird middle spot that I did not enjoy at all. I just mentioned how Cold Steel 3 has a lot more new areas than Horizon, but I'm going to double down and keep talking about it, because I don't think you understand how bad it is. Trails games may not be open world, but exploration is a big part of these games, at least to me. Reaching new areas and discovering them is great, and the more new places you visit, the bigger the world gets. That's one aspect that draws many people towards Trails, just how huge and alive the world is. This is another reason why I have Sky SC ranked so low, because there's not that many new areas in that game. By the way, this is another part where vibes come into play, and I'm sorry I suck so much at being objective. When I say new areas, I'm not out here counting every single new place. Because obviously Sky SC does technically have new areas, even in the earlier chapters. The ruins below Genis, the Hot Springs Cave, even the Ancient Dragon's Place. But to me, these don't feel like new areas. Maybe it's because they're dungeons, or because they're really close to other locations. Couldn't tell you exactly why, but I can tell you that the same happens in Horizon. The Levre and Chardin districts, the underground culvert, the ruins below the observatory, etc. All technically new areas, but to me, they're really not. To me, the only new area in the entire game would be Anchorville. You want to hear something crazy? The game that's considered by many to be complete filler, Daybreak 2 had 2 new areas. Messeldam and Nemeth Island, and let's not forget that Nemeth Island is massive. Again, this is a fully subjective thing, and a lot of you will say I'm insane, and honestly, you'd probably be right. But this is how I felt playing the game. To me, there was a clear lack of new areas. I didn't have that same sense of exploration that other Trails games gave me. What you can't really deny, however, is that even if they couldn't make more new areas for some reason, they could have at least used all the old ones. No Langport? No Horation? No Messeldam? They very easily could have worked us into the story. But no, for some reason, Falcom decided that it was better to have all 6 of Van's routes take place exclusively in Edith and Anchorville. I love Edith, but after 3 full games taking place in it, I have to admit I'm getting tired of it. Through the whole walkthrough, I complained quite a bit about side quests, and the truth is that this might have been some of the weakest in the franchise. I don't hate doing side quests, but the ones in Horizon just aren't anything special. I just beat the game and I can barely remember a couple of them. The only one that stood out was that one about Sunshine Agnès. Now, I won't deny that I cannot remember any side quests from Daybreak 1 or 2, but to be fair, I played those games a long time ago. I just looked at the lists, and I stand by my point that those 2 had more memorable side quests. One thing that proves my point is that a few of the side quests in Horizon reference side quests from Daybreak 2, and I remember them clearly once I encountered the characters involved. And since we're talking about those 2 games, I'd like to quickly mention that Daybreak 2 has less side quests than Horizon. 36 versus 49. Yes, you heard me. The filler game that everyone hates has less side quests than Horizon. Anyway, another issue is that here it seems like on many quests they just completely gave up with the whole Spriggan thing. I'd say that at least half of this could have been done by a Bracer without any issues, maybe even more. One of the main points that was supposed to separate the Calvart arc from the rest was that Band worked on jobs close to being illegal, ones that couldn't be taken to the Bracers of the police. That doesn't really apply to many of the side quests in Horizon. Speaking of being a Spriggan, another thing that was supposed to be a main mechanic of the Calvart games was the LGC alignment system. It was sort of a big deal in Daybreak 1, because depending on your actions, you could choose different party members for the Horation game, and you had rewards for maxing out an alignment in the final dungeon. Plus, some of the choices felt more important, especially the ones during Horation. In Daybreak 2, the functionality of it was severely reduced, but it still did some stuff. You got some holocores, some chests in the final dungeon, and a few choices still felt somewhat cool. But here in Horizon, it's like they fully gave up. The system might as well not exist at all. The only thing it does now is reward you with variations of the mere holocore. I don't understand why Falcom decided to not try to improve the system. Yes, it wasn't perfect back in Daybreak 1, but that doesn't mean it was bad. I enjoyed what the system brought to the table, and it was pretty different from anything we had seen before in Trails. Also, if they didn't want to keep working on it, they could have just removed it. It feels weird having a mechanic that pretty much does nothing. If there's one thing that Trails shines at, it's the characters. How they act, how they speak, how they evolve. There's a reason Rin Schwarzer is one of my favorite video game characters of all time, if not my favorite. His development throughout all of the Cold Steel games is nothing short of fantastic. But I'm sad to say that, at least to me, the character development in Horizon felt weaker than what I'm used to. The only characters that I can think of here that actually had a meaningful evolution would be Yorda and Agnes. Others like Catra and Elaine did evolve a bit, but not in any way that was surprising or different from before. And the main issue here was that there were plenty of disappointments. Van did not get any character development in Daybreak 2, and I have to say, Horizon wasn't any different. It really seems like his character just stopped moving after the end of Daybreak 1, where he accepted everyone's help and decided to rely on them more. I had high expectations for Reset, but the only thing we got was her backstory near the end of the game. Throughout the whole game, she kept freezing up at the sight of the executors. It felt like she was going to be important and get some development, but her character didn't really get much. What about Judith? Anchorville is her hometown, and her mother was there. I didn't expect much because Judith is pretty one-dimensional. No, I don't think every single character needs to be incredibly complex and always changing, but I wanted at least something. At least a meaningful dialogue of her wondering if she will ever measure up to her predecessors, or something like that. But nothing. Bergard didn't appear at all in Daybreak 2, so surely here in Horizons he got something, right? No, not really. Bergard was there, so whenever someone revealed an important detail, we could hear him think, ah yes, I knew this already. And that's another point I want to make. Not only was character development weak, but even the dialogues felt odd at times. It has always been annoying in Trails games seeing characters keeping things to themselves, or just not showing us what's going on through their heads. But in Horizon, it felt like this was a lot more common. Bergard is especially guilty of this, but other intelligent characters like Ren or Reset also did the same. Lines like, ah, this must be X, and they must be talking about X, without actually mentioning what X is. Characters hiding names inside their thoughts is just about the most immersion-breaking thing you can do. Nobody does that in real life, and I hate it. I want to see these characters think aloud and throw out theories and names. There's a bunch of villains using time travel and replicas of the Genesis. If there's a time to consider that crazy ideas might be true, it's right now. And like I said, I want to see their thought processes. It kinda pissed me off when, in the beginning of Van Route 5, out of nowhere, Agnes is like, oh yeah, off-screen, Catra, Ren and Reset thought really hard and figured out what the contamination really is. We get fully voiced dialogues for Van talking about tiramisu, but we don't get a dialogue for the three of them coming up with that theory? Come on. And it's not like only intelligent characters suffer from this issue. Every time the vestige with a sniper appeared and Ferry saw her, I was hoping she'd finally ask her if she was Ida. But no, it never happened. We never even saw her think about it. Anyway, I could keep mentioning characters that didn't get the development I expected, and other examples of weird writing, but I think you get the point by now. You may disagree, but to me, these two aspects were not at their best in Horizon. Funnily enough, while I think some characters got too little, I also think other characters got too much. I understand that Trails is known for having many characters and giving them all the love that they deserve. Like I said on the story walkthrough, I didn't hate that Jeffrey from Desire appeared again in Act 1. It's fine, they treat NPCs with respect. Props to Falcom. But at some point you just have to think that maybe you're doing too much. When you're writing about Kevin's arrival to the remains of Grail while she's going to fight Hamilton, maybe you should think twice before going, yeah, let's add Gotti, Mint and Lila in there, why not? When you're thinking about who to make the main cast of villains of the game, you don't just recycle characters that have previously died. Some are fine, but the members of Almata and Giacomo really didn't need to come back. These two cases are the worst, but there's others where even though the appearances kinda make sense, you can tell that they were just trying to fill a quota, or at least that's how it felt to me. Kayla and Cody appearing at the end of Van Route 2, the Kruga and the Ice and Shield in that same route, or Jinlu in Rin Route 3. Honestly, the main one that pisses me off is Kevin Route 3, and it's not only the amount of characters that appear there, but also how pointless the fight was. I already mentioned this somewhat in the walkthrough section, but a lot of the boss fights in this game just don't make much sense. The boss fight at the end of Van Route 1, the one at the start of Kevin Route 3, the fight before the final boss, and the final boss too. I might even add the fight at the end of Kevin Route 1, as cool as it was. I don't think he needed to test the picnic in front, he clearly knew how capable they were. Honestly, these two issues aren't that huge compared to all the other things I've mentioned, but I wanted to mention them anyway. Because yeah, that segment at the start of Kevin Route 3 really did tick me off. I was just complaining about the vestiges, but honestly, all of the villains in the Calvart arc have been incredibly weak. But Horizon just takes the cake here. Graham Hart isn't really a villain, even if his plan is a bit crazy. And neither is Hamilton, no matter how much the game tries to paint her as one. To me, she did what she had to do in order to ensure Samyuri had a future. This leaves us with only one actual group of villains, the vestiges. And I've already expressed how bad they are. Not only are you recycling previous villains, but you're getting the worst of them. You give them insane powers and technology, only for them to pretty much amount to nothing in the end. You put them all behind masks, as if we couldn't easily tell who most of them were just from their voices and body shapes. But the worst part might be that they just don't really have a clear purpose. I still don't understand the motives behind their actions. All of them just seemed like being evil for the sake of it, just like Almata. Which I guess kinda makes sense, considering half of their members come from there. The main problem here is that there's a high chance that they will also be the main group of villains in Horizon 2. And if that's the case, it's going to take a miracle to save that game. Anyway, that should be all of the actual issues I had with the game, but I want to let you know about a couple of sentiments I have before moving on to the conclusion. The first one is a fear that I hope turns out to be false, but I can't help but feel the series is slowly becoming more and more shonen. This is a common complaint of the Cold Steel games actually, and while I could see it there, the writing was still good, so I wasn't bothered by it. But here, seeing the animations become so much better and having so many more combat cutscenes while the writing has taken a hit, it's enough to make me pause, that's for sure. Not to mention, all of the quotes thrown by Gramhart and Kincaid in the ending felt like deliberate attempts to farm aura. You could tell, because they were speaking like normal people, and out of nowhere they hit you with, "Men may not have been able to fell God, but a new dawn will come nonetheless." You really expecting me to believe Renee would say that? Deep down, I know that this fear is probably unfounded, and that it's just a coincidence that they upgraded their cutscenes and the writing suddenly was worse. But I hope they understand that what makes the previous trails great isn't the actual fights, but everything behind them. The music, the characters, the gameplay, the reasons why, the conflicts. I didn't like the fight between Rufus and his clone because of the cool new animations. I liked it because of what it meant for him as a character. Looking towards the future and the inevitable fight between Rin and Shizuna, I hope Falcom understands that. The second sentiment is that I think it's getting harder and harder to surprise me after 13 games. This game had a lot of surprises, mostly the ones revealed in Kevin's routes, but a lot of others just didn't hit as hard for me. Funnily enough, I think the culprit for that is Genshin Impact. The false sky, the world stuck in a time loop, an entity floating above the planet being in control of it, the glitch effects from the vestiges. If you've played Genshin, all of this will sound familiar to you, and even if you haven't, I'm sure concepts like this have been used in other games. It feels like throughout the whole game, Falcom wanted us to be wowed more than any other emotion. But the problem is that I think they might have gone too far already. We still have Horizon 2 and another arc before the franchise truly reaches the end. If we're already talking about simulations, false skies, reaching the galaxy, space-time manipulation, how do they plan to surpass that for the remaining games? The remaining two Subterrions are wind and water, and I don't know about you, but to me they don't sound as cool as time, space or mirage. Are they going to say that there was a hidden 8th Subterrion all along? And even if they nail it with that, how do you raise the stakes higher than the whole world resetting? How do you make the scale bigger than it currently is? More than I am disappointed with how Horizon turned out, I am scared about the future of the series. Like I said before, I've been let down many times by JRPGs franchises in the past, by companies that I thought would never fail me, and yet they did, because they didn't understand how to create a proper conclusion. I want to believe, I really do, but I think Falcom have put themselves in a position where it's going to take a miracle for this franchise to get the finale it deserves. The finale I and everyone else who loves Trails want to be perfect. That was the longest review I've written so far, and yet it was the fastest. I just had so much I wanted to say about the game, and more than anything, I wanted to put my thoughts on paper. Because honestly, when I finished the game, I didn't know what to think. I was completely stunned after playing it. To be honest, I think I'm still kinda stunlocked. I didn't know how to feel about the game, and even now, I'm not sure. I know it's at least good. I mean, it's a Trails game, that shouldn't be a surprise. But I don't know where it lies in between good and excellent. The game has left me so confused that I've had to rethink how I feel about the series as a whole, and how much I truly love the other games. What I can say for sure is that the game has disappointed me, just like Kingdom Hearts 3 and Xenoblade 3 did. But unlike those two games, which failed me at the end, Horizon is the opposite. I value the finale of a game really highly, because it's the hardest thing to get right nowadays. And I know I said it's the worst cliffhanger in the series, but I wouldn't say it's a bad ending, far from it. I think the expectations I had for the game will forever blind me when trying to figure out how I feel about it. One thing with Trails is that, even though all the games are amazing, to me there isn't one that soars above and beyond. They're all really consistent, which means that there isn't a game that's much worse than the others, but by that same metric, there isn't one that's far ahead. They're so close together that even now, I still have trouble deciding if my favorite is Cold Steel 3 or 4, and none of them reach close to perfection in my opinion. My favorite game of all time would probably be Kingdom Hearts 2. It's either that or Final Fantasy XIV. The only issue I can bring up for Kingdom Hearts 2 is that Reflect is a bit too strong. To me, it's as close to perfection as a video game can get. Comparing that to Cold Steel 3 or 4, both of them have quite a few more issues. So when playing Trails Beyond the Horizon, I wanted for it to be the one. I wanted to like it more. I wanted to jump around and scream everywhere that the game is peak and a masterpiece and the best thing Falcom has ever put out. But unfortunately, I don't feel that way, and I can't lie to myself. I know that I've been very negative throughout the whole story section of the review, but don't get it twisted, I don't hate the game, and I really wanted to love it. It's just that it is what it is. I wanted to love it because I've been chasing the high of a proper ending ever since I finished Endwalker. Seeing the cover art of the game, how it involved going to space, and how everyone talked about it, I couldn't help being reminded of Endwalker. It is always my measuring bar for games that advertise themselves as a huge conclusion or a similar concept, and it's a peak that is never met. And it didn't need to be met here. This is the third game of a 4-game saga. I fully knew that going into it, and yet I treated it like it was going to be the conclusion of the arc. It was partly the game's fault, partly social media's fault, and partly my fault. But even with that, I believe that the game has plenty of actual issues, and I don't think it's the best in the franchise. I don't think that would have changed, no matter how I approached the game. At the very least, I can say that the game did complete what I believe was its main function, setting up Horizon 2. I am hyped for Horizon 2, but I am cautiously hyped, because there's just so much they need to get right. For one, they need to give out all the answers that we didn't get in this game. Here's a list on screen of all the questions I would want to have answered in Horizon 2. Pause the video if you want to read them. There's so many, I'm not going to bother listing them out. What I will talk about is everything I would personally change or do for Horizon 2. You may not agree with some of this, and that's fine. I would remove all side content on the garden. We've had enough side content. For the last game of the Calvert saga, it's time to lock in. Change up the structure significantly. Make sure players never know what's coming next. Give character development to the ones that still didn't fully get it. Ban, Reset, Judith, Bergath and Shizuna would be my main ones. Make sure every faction is important and plays a part, but don't overdo it with secondary characters. New areas are a must. Do not return to Edith again unless strictly necessary for the story. Remove NPC double lines. If you don't know, many NPCs have 2 different lines of dialogue, but most of the time, the second one is just a shortened version of the first one. We don't need this, they just make the players like me who talk to all NPCs lose a lot of time rereading stuff. Add more quartz, rebalance the game, and make sure you give the defensive skills better names so dumb players like me can realize they're strong now. Design better difficulty modes. I said I would probably leave this one for the game after Horizon 2, but honestly I think they have time to do it. Focus on giving answers and not posing more questions. Finally, give the game an ending with the grandeur that's expected of the final game of the Calvert arc. It has to be on the level of Endwalker. I won't accept anything lesser than that. That's all. There's a really good chance I've forgotten about stuff everywhere. I mean, while writing this, I just remembered I forgot to place a new shading when I was talking about the presentation. Also, after checking out the relevant scenes while I was recording them, I think I finally understand the vestiges and what they were doing, even if the how still eludes me. And honestly, I still don't think it makes much sense. If you think I missed anything or think something I said was wrong, please leave a comment. I'd love to talk more about the game. And I'm sorry if you thought this review was too negative. Like I said, I don't think it was worth it to mention the positives. If you're watching this review, chances are you finished the game and you love Trails just as much or even more than I do. So you must understand what makes these games amazing. I don't think I need to say it. It's not like the game was riddled with issues, and overall I would say I enjoyed it, and that it's a good game. Now, all that's left to do is wait, though some have been doing that for a few years already. But I'm okay with waiting. I waited for 13 years for Kingdom Hearts 3. I'll be fine waiting until next year. I really like how Falcom has decided to take their time with Horizon 2, and I hope they can deliver a satisfying conclusion. I also hope they can come up with a better name than Horizon 2. In a way, Kincaid's quotes I called Aura Farming fits the game pretty well. Men may not have been able to fell God, but a new dawn will come nonetheless. God being the unachievable expectations this game had to reach, and the new dawn being the sequel. God, that was so cringy. How are you supposed to finish a review? I don't understand. Anyway, I eagerly await the day the new dawn arrives. And with that, I take my leave. See you next time.